stand in our way, and our golden age has just begun.
This is Human Events with Jack Posobiec.
Now it's time for everyone to understand what America First truly means. Welcome to the Second American Revolution.
All right, Jack Posobiec, we are back live, Human Events Daily. We're here in Phoenix, Arizona, and we've got Blake Neff on, Charlie Kirk show producer, and someone who has, with me, spent a lot of time talking about the history of Antifa, the background of international communism and these groups as they were in their first iteration, as they were funded directly by Bolshevik Russia, 1930s Germany, 1930s Spain. They were seeded. That was what really gave rise to the destabilization of those, and of course the Spanish Civil War, and then the fall of the Weimar Republic and the start of World War II in Germany. But that's different from understanding what Antifa is today. And so, Blake, the first thing that I think we have to address is that these people running around, and the left has already begun this mass gaslighting operation to say there's no such thing as Antifa because Antifa is an idea. And by the way, the first response, we're kind of setting up the debates, I guess, maybe, but also talking about investigative procedures that can be done. The first response is always, well, yes, so is radical Islam. Like radical Islam is obviously an ideology, and there are groups that espouse that. That's what we're going after. It's really not that complicated.
Yeah, it's not that complicated, but we should also concede it's complex in the sense that you can't just go out and say like, well, we're going to, blacklist Antifa, and then, you can't send money to the Antifa LLC anymore. There's going to need to be seriousness in the sense that there are specific organizations that adhere to this. There are entities that, operate in legal gray areas or act to aggressively further illegal action. But some actually literally just do go by that name. Like there is an Antifa group in Portland, Oregon. It is named Rose City Antifa. I am at their .org page right now. And groups and other names like Anti-Fascist Action is one you'll see.
Yeah,
so a lot of cities have
the Seattle one has a name like that too.
Seattle Anti-Fascist Action is one. Chicago has one.
Utah. Utah has one as well. And there's also a number of groups that use the moniker of John Brown Gun Club, Socialist Rifle Alliance, and that, again, they exist for the specific purpose, and those exist for the specific purpose of training with arms and training militant cells for these types of operations. John Brown, a sort of proto-communist from the Civil War era, or pre-Civil War era. And so the groups do exist, and Refuse Fascism is another one, which is, of course, is just one slight word away from Antifa. And the way that you go against these groups, and by the way, though, this isn't actually anything new for the U.S. government. For example, when Rudy Giuliani himself, who has been incredible in the fight to purge communists from our institutions and corporations in terms of in the wake of Charlie's murder, when he went after the 5 families of the Mafia in New York, it's not like you just walk up to the mobsters and say, hello, can you give us a list of everyone who was on the mob payroll? Of course, that's not how it works. That's obviously not how it works. And I remember also, by the way, and he tells the story, that when he first announced his original investigations against the Mafia, the media also used to say the Mafia doesn't exist. And yet, obviously, we know that he did that. And so
it's so bizarre to hear it doesn't exist when, for example, in 2020, they were able to besiege a courthouse in Portland for
2 months straight.
Months on end, and there were murders committed, or the murderer is by the way, I'm Antifa, and they were able to do things like get him in contact with Vice.
That was the guy from Portland, Michael. Or was the victim's name Michael?
I can't remember exactly, but it was the one where Vice knew where the killer was and obscured his location.
And so, they eventually caught him. I think it was Olympia Park, Washington, but he had crossed the border. So the marshals went out to go for him. He pulls a gun on them, and then there was no more Antifa. That Antifa went away. And at least in that instance. And yes, Vice gave him this interview where he calmly spoke to them about how he stalked and targeted a Trump supporter and shot him dead in the street in cold blood because he was wearing a Trump hat and had gone to this prayer meeting, in 2020, just in the middle of the street. And so, and these types of symbology, these types of rhetoric, of course, go up to and include the assassination of Charlie, because a number of the bullets, half of the bullets, you could say, that were in this rifle had Antifa symbology on them. So, hey, fascist, catch.
I love how that's a reference to a video game. Oh, why'd he pick that reference from a video game?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And then Bella Ciao itself. So Bella Ciao was an Italian communist song from World War II, and has since gone on to become. No, it's a very popular song in its own right. It's a good tune. Like,
I was looking into it, and it's so funny because this is so common with a lot of this stuff.
But, let me
it's a fake it's like a fake World War II song. It's just a folk song, and they gave it the anti-fascist lyrics like after the war, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So it was they try to. This is what Antifa always does. So for example, when I say Antifa comes from Germany, they'll say, well, yeah, we were fighting the fascists, but that's just not true.
No, you
because
weren't.
the original iteration of Antifa was fighting the Weimar Republic and the government. And in fact, there were multiple instances, including in Bavaria and other times, where they would work with the National Socialists in sort of joint efforts, joint operations, joint direct action, as they would call it in their parlance, to just do things that would screw with the system, or marches, or strikes, general strikes. And so Bella Ciao has taken on, and so they just lie, which, I mean, communists, wow, who knew? And so Bella Ciao, that being said, has this dual role of, yes, it is also a very popular song in Europe. The Netflix show Money Heist has it as sort of the theme song, but it is also the international anthem of Antifa. And you would have to be pretty familiar with Antifa and Antifa symbology to know that. That's just not something that the average person would be like, oh yeah, Antifa and their favorite song. I know about that. It's this may be the very first time that people are even hearing that information, and yet when you're in Antifa, this is something that they fixate on quite a bit. It's always very romantic. They're always telling stories about the Spanish Civil War and how close we came. We almost had it. There's also a huge Antifa element that goes to Rojava in Kurdistan, and so they're directly tied to a lot of the elements there. There's some ideological connections as well with Öcalan, and to be true, many of the militant members of Antifa would travel to Rojava, would travel to this area of Syria up there in Kurdistan, and receive training from pro-Kurdish groups in weapons and in tactics that we know they've come back to the United States. And for example, one of them was participating in the militant siege of CHAZ up in Seattle. So we can see these direct ties all over the place. And by the way, just in that instance right there, there are obvious international ties as well that would really open up what the government is able to do. So Blake, I think we've established sort of how Antifa works. There are front groups. Some groups use the name, some groups don't, but it is a shared ideology and to be sure, shared tactics, which, so having a counterterrorism background from when I was at Guantanamo, something that obviously, funny enough, did you know that terrorists don't usually operate in the open? That actually they try to hide.
Wait,
and
like you
obfuscate
can't just
their
go to their
operations.
office in downtown, like
And
the terror office?
It's not like the bureau, the bureau of Al Qaeda. It's no, actually they do this all the time. So this is a very common procedure and art, really, to uncovering them. And of course, they always lie. I'm not really a member. This is part of their masking of their operations. And so what you have to do is peel that away. And one of the best ways to do that is following the tactics. Because when you see black bloc, when you see the specific targeting that they do, when you see these what we call tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPs, so tracking TTP flow can be another way in terms of course, and in addition to, of course, the classic money, communications, network trees, all of that stuff that we're all very familiar with, that the government will now be able to use to start mapping out these networks.
Exactly. Man.
And so I think we've got 2 minutes left on this segment, and I think we should also start talking a little bit about how the government has enormous powers that they can bring to bear now.
Yeah, and I mean, the most obvious thing you can do is like once you're willing to mark like, oh, this is actually like a highly, problematic like pro-terrorist activity, you can just bluntly be like, yeah, we're going to start looking much more aggressively at, if you're directing money towards those ends, if it seems like your primary purpose is to aid those ends, what if we decided to be like, hey, we're going to actually start thinking about why universities are giving honorary degrees to Angela Davis, who basically was Antifa in like the late 60s and 70s, helped murder several people.
Bill Ayers?
Bill Ayers. Like a lot of these people, I don't know if there's any way we could still prosecute these people many years later, because those were all like obvious hash jobs that they screwed up.
Oh, we can get creative. Yeah, I love, by the way, there's that meme about that. The Wikipedia page of like every domestic terrorist on the left is like
social activist.
Is like it's always like early life, goes to college, participates in series of bombings, and then it's like goes to trial, gets out on a technicality, gets hired by an Ivy League college.
Yeah, like Bill Ayers had to like flee the country for a while, and then he just came back, and they'll be like, oh, well, like the FBI like messed up some of the evidence. Okay, I don't think that would have stopped us these days.
No,
personally.
and it's not going to stop us. And honestly, I think DHS could perhaps take the lead here, because again, this is a domestic terrorist organization, and DHS absolutely has the great authorities to bring to bear. Right back, Jack Posobiec, Human Events.